Welcome to this Wednesday's edition of Market Mantra, the program in which we give you a complete update on the economic, business and stock market news of the day. I'm Arjun Chaudhary and with me is my co-anchor in Hindi, Vishal Sharma.
नमस्कार, मार्केट मंत्र में आप सभी का स्वागत। प्रतिदिन की तरह आज भी हम देश और दुनिया से आर्थिक, व्यापारिक और शेयर बाजार के ताजा समाचार आप तक लाएंगे और उन पर चर्चा भी करेंगे। चर्चा के लिए कार्यक्रम में आमंत्रित हैं बिजनेस स्टैंडर्ड के एडिटोरियल डायरेक्टर ए.के. भट्टाचार्य। भट्टाचार्य जी नमस्कार, स्टूडियो में आपका स्वागत।
नमस्कार।
और सबसे पहले हेडलाइंस के साथ हैं अर्जुन चौधरी।
Wholesale inflation eases to 12.41% in August this year with ease in manufactured products. Domestic stocks witness modest losses. Sensex closes below 60,400 level. Nifty settles near 18,000 mark. And rupee weakens by 29 paise against the US dollar.
विनिर्मित वस्तुओं की कीमतों में नरमी से थोक मुद्रास्फीति अगस्त में कम होकर 12.41% पर आई। घरेलू शेयर बाजारों में गिरावट। सेंसेक्स 60,400 के स्तर से नीचे हुआ बंद। निफ्टी 18,000 के नजदीक आया और डॉलर के मुकाबले रुपया हुआ 29 पैसे कमजोर।
And let's have a look at our top story. Wholesale price-based inflation eased to 12.41% in August as compared to 13.93% in the preceding month, according to the Commerce and Industry Ministry data released today. The WPI inflation fell on easing prices of manufactured products. The wholesale inflation was at a record high of 15.88% in May this year and stood at 11.64% in August last year. The WPI inflation continued its declining trend for the third month in August this year but remained in double digits for the 17th consecutive month beginning April last year. As per the data released on Monday, retail inflation based on consumer price index stood at 7% in August this year. AKB, as we formally call you, what's your take on the inflation figures right now? It's still in double digits. We're talking about wholesale, not the consumer price index. And, usually we discuss about the stock market, and there's a rule of 20 in terms of what is the interest, buying interest in the stock market if the rule of 20 includes the inflation figures being low. So how do you look at the macroeconomics of the inflation data right now?
As you rightly pointed out, that these are wholesale price we're talking about, and the wholesale price index has been in double digits for the last 17 months. Now, the issue is this is deceleration of sorts, whereas the retail price are still on the higher side. So what wholesale price index tells you is that what is the producer's cost of acquiring or procuring the inputs which go into their output. So when the wholesale price index stays in double digits for 17 consecutive months, what it does indicate is that the producer's margins are under pressure. So this does not impact the price at which you and I are buying our goods and services. As a matter of fact, wholesale price index does not include any services, whereas the retail price, the consumer price index, has services. So this is a message for the industrial sector, the manufacturing sector, the so-called India Inc., where their margins will continue to be under pressure, and therefore their bottom line will continue to remain under pressure. So, and since this is going on for the last 17 months, so we need to look at it with some concern, caution, particularly in the context that in the August consumer price, instead of going down, it moved up from 6.7 to 7.1%. This will also have a bearing, in my view, on the kind of discussion that the Monetary Policy Committee of Reserve Bank of India holds in this month end, 28th to 29th, I think, because of the holidays in October, they have advanced it. So because of the August CPI inflation being elevated and WPI still remaining in high double digits, I would now believe that Reserve Bank of India probably is going in for another rate hike.
जी डॉक्टर भट्टाचार्य, अगर हम यहाँ देखें तो पिछले साल की इसी अवधि में थोक मुद्रास्फीति 11.64 पर थी और अभी हालांकि कमी आई है, लेकिन अभी भी जो है ये डबल डिजिट में बनी हुई है। क्या ये जो कमी आई है थोक मुद्रास्फीति में, इसका असर जो उपभोक्ता मुद्रास्फीति जो होती है मूल्य सूचकांक पर आधारित सीपीआई पर भी इसका असर देखने को मिलेगा कुछ?
देखिए, ऐसा है कि जो जैसे मैंने बताया कि जो होलसेल प्राइस इंडेक्स जो है वो जो प्रोड्यूसर्स का जो दाम जिसमें दे रहे हैं उसमें आता है। तो उनकी अगर मान लीजिए अगर उनकी खरीदने की जो कॉस्ट जो है वो एलिवेटेड है अभी भी, तो जब वो माल बेचते हैं खुदरा बाजार में तो वो मालों के दाम में भी जरा बढ़ोतरी होती है जी। तो अगर होलसेल प्राइस इंडेक्स इस लेवल में रहे तो ओवर ए लॉन्ग टर्म कंज्यूमर प्राइस इंडेक्स, रिटेल प्राइस इंडेक्स में भी इसका असर जरूर देखने को मिलेगा। और इसीलिए जो इन्फ्लेशनरी जो एक एक्सपेक्टेशन जो इकोनॉमी में एक आ गई है उसको निकालना इतना डिफिकल्ट मालूम हो रहा है, क्योंकि जब होलसेल प्राइस इंडेक्स बढ़ा रहता है तो रिटेल प्राइसेस में भी उसका इम्पैक्ट होता है, क्योंकि जो प्रोड्यूसर जो है उसका अपना तो थोड़ा बहुत तो मार्जिन अपना इंटैक्ट करेगा ही जी। तो इसीलिए होलसेल प्राइस इंडेक्स का 17 महीने तक बड़ा होना, डबल डिजिट में रहना, और रिटेल प्राइस का जो अभी तक जो 7% बढ़ गया है, ये दोनों चीज इन्फ्लेशन मैनेजमेंट के लिए एक नया चैलेंज साबित हो रहा है, पर्टिकुलरली एट ए टाइम जब रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया ने ऑलरेडी 1.4 परसेंटेज पॉइंट इंक्रीज तो ऑलरेडी कर ही दिया है इन्होंने। और अगर अगले जो रिव्यू में शायद लग रहा है कि फिर और से एक बार इंटरेस्ट रेट बढ़ाने की एक इंडिकेशन मिल रहा है।
Well, the Ministry of Finance, we have Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman has made it quite clear that the central bank, RBI, is not responsible for controlling inflation only by means of raising the repo rate. And that's not the only way by which you control inflation. When you say about the raw materials, intermediate goods and the finished goods, all of which are in a chain and they combine to, when they're sold in the market, the price at which they're sold, that would determine the WPI, not the retail inflation figures. But if you just look at the futures market, we are finding that the prediction is that the prices are coming down. So why is it that the commodities, the raw materials, the processed goods are actually putting a pressure on the manufacturers who are converting them into finished goods? Why is it that inflation is still a threat? It's still in double digits as far as wholesale is concerned, at the wholesaler's price.
Well, you know, there are many factors that contribute to inflationary pressures in the economy. What the finance minister said was that Reserve Bank of India is the only agency that should take care of the inflation challenge. There are other ways also of handling the inflation issue, supply side, making sure that there are more goods and services available at a reasonable cost. There are many steps that have been taken to ensure that goods are not going out of the country and creating a situation.
Well, if you take steel, for example, AKB, I'm sorry to interrupt you, the government has imposed duty on exported steel so that the steel is sold within the domestic economy and they're not able to realize...
That is exactly what I was trying to say.
Or the quota itself, you know, the volume of
that is exactly what I was trying to say, that there are other measures. This is what the finance minister was talking about, and those measures have been taken. Now, it is very clear that the inflationary pressures within the economy is so strong and the surge is evident that it is becoming difficult to bring it down. Now, remember that this is the time when the winter session, the inflation normally, cools off a little bit. So, which is why I said at the beginning, the Reserve Bank of India will be under tremendous pressure to once again raise the interest rates.
So these companies which are selling commodities, their prices have actually gone up in this bullish market. I'm bringing about that linkage because the price to earnings ratio is very high, and usually when inflation is at a high and the prices are at a high, then the market is seen as overpriced. So, but the market is still bullish. The commodities market is still being controlled. It is price sensitive. There is an urge to increase prices. So, what are the challenges from August onwards? You have September, October, November, December. Are they likely to come down, the inflation figures? Are they going to go up again?
Well, it all depends on many factors. One is domestic supply situation. Number two is what is the liquidity situation in the economy. Number three is the global factors. And the global factor is a very, very important play there. To what extent the crude oil prices behave. And now these days it's no longer the crude oil prices, but it's also the LNG price. Right now the G7 is discussing a question of a price cap on petroleum products. Now, if the price cap situation will have a bearing on India's access to cheaper Russian crude, because Russia is clearly threatened that if India agrees and joins the price cap movement by G7, then Russia's supply to oil may be adversely affected. Now, which will mean that India's crude oil import will be affected. Now, it is a fact that crude oil prices have remained by and large benign in the last few weeks, but oil companies have not been passing on that benefit to the consumers. Now, that is another factor which is probably the finance minister hinted at. Now, the oil companies are trying to shore up their and actually compensate the losses that they incurred in the early time when they could not pass on the increases. So now they are not reducing the price, although the international crude oil prices have come down. So probably some measures can be taken, since you asked me what can be expected from August onwards, can be taken by which the retail crude oil prices of petroleum products may actually be brought down through some intervention. So that will have a positive impact on the overall price situation.
Finally, on food inflation, it's at 12.37% as compared to 10.77% in the previous month. This affects everyone, including those listening to the program. Again, there are pressures. The retailers, wholesalers are looking to get compensated, and there is a huge demand for this particular commodity. Supply side constraints are there. How do you see the government tackling this difficult issue?
Well, the government has already taken some steps. Number one is exports, which were by and large free on the commodity side. They have been brought under some restrictions. That's number one. Number two, there is a strong demand for resumption of futures trading and options trading in commodities. They had been put on hold from December 2021 onwards. So the government is reviewing it, but I don't think the government will agree to resumption of futures trading. And that, if it is not resumed, then that will be another step, in my view, to keep a check on domestic price situation. Because futures trade in a shallow market like we do have in the commodity segment in India can play havoc with the price line.
बात शेयर बाजारों की करते हैं। घरेलू शेयर बाजारों की बात करें तो प्रमुख घरेलू शेयर बाजार आज नुकसान के साथ बंद हुए। वैश्विक शेयर बाजारों में गिरावट का असर प्रमुख शेयर सूचकांकों सेंसेक्स और निफ्टी पर भी। सेंसेक्स 60,400 के स्तर से नीचे, जबकि निफ्टी 18,000 के नजदीक बंद हुआ। बॉम्बे स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का सेंसेक्स आज 0.37% के नुकसान से 224 अंक लुढ़ककर 60,347 पर बंद हुआ। नेशनल स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का निफ्टी भी 0.37% की कमी से 66 अंक गिरकर 18,004 पर आ गया। व्यापक बाजार में बीएसई मिड कैप इंडेक्स में 0.1% की मामूली गिरावट रही, जबकि स्मॉल कैप इंडेक्स लगभग सपाट बंद हुआ।
Sensex and Nifty today witnessed modest losses. Both stock indices fell in sync with losses in the global share markets. Sensex closed below 60,400 level, while Nifty settled near 18,000 mark. Sensex declined by 224 points or 0.37% to finish at 60,347. Nifty also plunged by 66 points or 0.37% to end at 18,004. In the broader market at the BSE, the mid-cap index slipped 0.10% and the small-cap index ended flat. In the Sensex pack, 15 companies posted gains while 15 logged losses. IndusInd Bank climbed 4.5%. Power Grid and NTPC both gained 2.6% each. SBI Bank added 2.4%. On the other hand, Infosys tumbled 4.5% and TCS plunged 3.4%. Tech Mahindra declined 2.6% and HCL Tech ended 2.4% down. In sectoral indices at the BSE, 6 sectors gained while 13 logged losses. Metal sector rose the most as it added 1.9%. BankX gained 1.3%. Basic materials surged 1.2%. And finance added 0.9%. On the other side, IT index tumbled 3.3% and tech sector plunged 2.9%. Oil and gas declined 0.9%. The overall breadth of the BSE trade was negative as shares of 1,633 companies gained, while 1,843 companies fell. Shares of 135 companies remained unchanged.
और रुपए के प्रदर्शन पर नजर डालें तो अंतरबैंक विदेशी मुद्रा बाजार में डॉलर के मुकाबले रुपया आज 29 पैसे कमजोर होकर 79 रुपए 44 पैसे प्रति डॉलर के स्तर पर बंद हुआ। विश्व की 6 प्रमुख मुद्राओं की तुलना में डॉलर की मजबूती दर्शाने वाला डॉलर इंडेक्स 0.2% गिरकर 109.5 पर कारोबार कर रहा था। भट्टाचार्य जी, अगर आज शेयर बाजार के हम पूरे कारोबार को देखें तो बहुत ज्यादा उतार चढ़ाव रहा और 1200 से अधिक अंक का उतार चढ़ाव देखा गया और आखिर में बाजार सेंसेक्स 224 अंक की गिरावट के साथ बंद हुआ। 4 दिन से जो तेजी देख रहे थे हम, वो शेयर बाजारों में आज थम गई। क्या जो अमेरिका में जो शेयर बाजारों में गिरावट आई, केवल उसका ही असर आप ये देख रहे हैं या कोई और भी कारण आपको दिखाई पड़ता है आज मार्केट का?
अमेरिका में जो हुआ उसका तो असर जरूर है, पर जो तात्पर्य जो आज मार्केट का है वो मैं समझता हूं कि जो अमेरिकन जो इकोनॉमी में जो डेवलपमेंट जो हुई, जो इन्फ्लेशन और जो मीटिंग फेड की आने वाली है उसका जो एक डर है कि इन्फ्लेशन रेट फिर से बढ़ जाएगा, उसके बावजूद किस तरह से आज स्टॉक मार्केट बाउंस बैक किया है, वो एक हमें अच्छी तरह उसको समझना पड़ेगा। और मैं समझता हूं कि ये जो बाउंस बैक जो है वो बाउंस बैक डोमेस्टिक सेक्टर्स की कारण है। पहला कारण ये है कि जो बैंकिंग व्यवस्था जो है उसमें एक बहुत जो अर्निंग्स की जो प्रोजेक्शंस जो आ रही हैं, जो गाइडेंस जो आ रही हैं, वो काफी पॉजिटिव हैं। तो अगर आप आज के स्टॉक मार्केट में देखेंगे वो बैंकिंग सेक्टर के स्टॉक्स काफी अच्छा किया है। दूसरा, जो मेटल सेक्टर जो है उसमें भी काफी अच्छा देखा गया है। उसका कारण यह है कि जो अगर आप कैपेसिटी यूटिलाइजेशन लेवल देखें मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेक्टर में, जो मेटल सेक्टर को सप्लाई करता है उसमें 75% क्रॉस कर गया है। इसका मतलब जो एक पहले का एक डर जो था कि कैपेसिटी यूटिलाइजेशन 69-70 में अटका हुआ है, वो अगर 75% क्रॉस कर गया है, इसका मतलब यह है कि जो इन्वेस्टमेंट की जो रेट जो है उसको बढ़ने की हम उम्मीद कर सकते हैं। और उसी के लिए जो इस सेक्टर में जो थोड़ा बहुत जो हमने देखा है, जो बायोंसी देखी है वो देखा है। प्रॉब्लम आ रही है आईटी सेक्टर में, इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी सेक्टर में, जहां पे जो इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी सेक्टर अपने उम्मीद से काफी आगे चला गया था कि जो कोविड के बाद में ये जो इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी सेक्टर का जो एक्सपेक्टेशन जो था वो काफी आगे चला गया था। लोग समझ रहे थे कि इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी जिस तरह से कोविड के टाइम में अच्छा किया है वो उसी तरह आगे और भी करते रहेगी। पर मार्केट ने ये अब समझ लिया है कि आईटी सेक्टर की जो ग्रोथ की जो एक्सपेक्टेशंस जो हैं वो काफी लिमिटेड हैं और जो गेन्स आने वाली थी वो उतनी गेन्स आगे नहीं आएगी। मार्केट हमेशा आगे देखती है और इसको देखते हुए आईटी सेक्टर में अगर आप देखेंगे पिछले कई दिनों से उसमें ज्यादा कोई बायंसी या कोई जो नॉर्मली जो हम देखते हैं जो पॉजिटिविटी होती है वो अब नहीं दिखाई दे रही है। आज की तारीख में भी वो आईटी सेक्टर में भी 3-4% का गिरावट हमने देखी। तो ये 3 चीज जो हैं हमें इसको समझना पड़ेगा.
Well, we're heading for a short commercial break. We'll come back with more on the discussion on the stock market with AKB, but before that, we'll take a short break.
उपभोक्ताओं तक पहुंचने का सुलभ और सस्ता माध्यम है आकाशवाणी.
आकाशवाणी के विभिन्न केंद्रों से कीजिए अपने उत्पादों और सेवाओं का प्रचार विज्ञापनों के माध्यम से.
लोकल और राष्ट्रीय स्तर पर कीजिए अपने बिजनेस का विस्तार, क्योंकि आकाशवाणी में विज्ञापन बुकिंग हुई बहुत ही आसान.
अब घर, दफ्तर या दुकान पर बैठे बैठे आप कर सकते हैं विज्ञापनों की बुकिंग.
डायल कीजिए 8700014242.
नंबर एक बार फिर नोट करें, 8700014242.
Welcome back to Market Mantra. We're discussing about the market performance with our expert, A.K. Bhattacharya, whom we fondly call as AKB. AKB, the FIIs were the net sellers in the market today to the tune of 1,400 crore rupees, and the DIIs were net buyers to the tune of 188 crore rupees only. So the market has corrected after gains. It's crossed 60,000. They were expecting corrections in the market, but not a very deep correction. But if you look at the net sell margin of the FIIs, does that ring an alarm bell into you, especially for the remainder of the week or for that matter next week?
I think the FII's behavior will remain under watch. FIIs have been investing, had been net buyers for the last few days, and that trend has been broken with today's number that you just now mentioned. And therefore, what I would submit here is, given the new numbers on inflation, given the fact that the core inflation is still on the rise in the US, I would say that the Fed meeting that will be taking place in a few days from now will almost is reasonably certain that they will go in for another round of hike, which Mr. Powell had actually hinted at earlier. So given that situation, my sense is that the FII's flow of money will remain very, very tepid or moderate in the coming days, and therefore the stock market will be impacted to that extent. The important thing that needs to be watched is whether that gap is made good by the domestic investors or not. Now, so far, domestic investors in the last few days in the rally when the stock market is going up, they're actually booking profit and getting out of the market. Today is a change that has taken place. So, the RBI's Monetary Policy Committee's decision will to some extent influence the domestic investors' approach. There is one point that you must take note, that the bond market has suddenly livened up, in a sense that the yields have fallen, the bond prices are going up, and as a result, if this trend continues, one has to watch it, whether there is some sort of a move back towards the debt segment of the markets from equity. Maybe that time is not yet appropriate, or maybe it's not yet ready, but that shift has to be closely watched.
जी भट्टाचार्य जी, ब्रेक से पहले हम बात कर रहे थे आईटी सेक्टर के बारे में और आईटी शेयरों का जो खराब प्रदर्शन चल रहा है, वो उसके पीछे आप मुख्य वजह क्या देखते हैं? आईटी सेक्टर के शेयरों पे जो इतना दबाव देखा जा रहा है,
उसका जो आशा जो आईटी सेक्टर की ऊपर थी कि उनका परफॉर्मेंस जो कोविड काल में जो परफॉर्मेंस था, वो अब आईटी सेक्टर के जो मार्केट का असेसमेंट है कि उसपे ऊपर ज्यादा कोई इजाफा शायद नहीं होगा. जो आईटी सेक्टर ने जो गेन किया था कोविड काल में, वो जो गेन जो मार्केट ने आईटी सेक्टर को काफी बढ़ावा दिया था उस गेन को देखते हुए, पर पोस्ट कोविड जमाने में वो आईटी सेक्टर की कोई नई ट्रिगर पॉइंट्स नहीं आ रही हैं, और इसीलिए मार्केट अपने आप को करेक्ट कर रही है आईटी सेक्टर की जगह.
जी, लेट्स हैव अ लुक एट द एशियन मार्केट्स नाउ.
जी, एशियाई बाजारों की बात करें तो अमेरिका में मुद्रास्फीति उम्मीदों से अधिक रहने के कारण वैश्विक शेयर बाजार आज लुढ़क गए. अमरीकी शेयर बाजारों में गिरावट का असर एशियाई बाजारों पर भी पड़ा। जापान का निकेई सूचकांक 2.8% लुढ़क गया और हांगकांग का हैंग सेंग 2.5% के नुकसान के साथ बंद हुआ। दक्षिण कोरिया का कोस्पी 1.6% टूट गया, जबकि चीन का शंघाई कंपोजिट इंडेक्स और सिंगापुर का स्ट्रेट्स टाइम सूचकांक 0.8% के नुकसान में रहे। यूरोपीय क्षेत्र की बात करें तो अंतर्दिवसीय कारोबार में यहां भी गिरावट का रुख था। लंदन का FTSE 100 1.6% के नुकसान के साथ कारोबार कर रहा था। जर्मनी का डेक्स 1.2% और फ्रांस का कैक 0.9% की गिरावट में चल रहे थे।
Moving on to the U.S. stock market, U.S. stocks witnessed big losses amid heavy sell-off yesterday. The three major share indices declined after a higher-than-expected U.S. inflation report, which dented investor sentiment. It also raised fear that the Fed Reserve could scale back its policy tightening in the coming months. The Dow Jones Industrial Average Index lost 3.9%, the S&P 500 plunged 4.3%, and the Nasdaq Composite Index tumbled 5.2%. AKB, you're mentioning about the bond market. In fact, for the 1-year yield on treasuries of the U.S., it's almost 4%. We have figures for the 3 months all the way down to the 30-year U.S. treasuries. But the U.S. dollar index is touching 110 despite the inflation figures and a technical recession in the U.S. with a positive jobs report. What does this mean for hedge funds who borrow at a low rate and then invest in emerging markets like India? So what's the FPI participation going to be like?
To a great extent, this suggests that the arbitrage opportunity is very much there. And whatever inflows that one may expect will depend a lot on this arbitrage opportunity and its existence. And it also indicates how the stock markets are moving away from fundamentals to more arbitrage and financialization of the stock market.
Briefly, the rupee weakened by 30 paise, but the dollar is getting stronger. What's the short to medium term for the rupee?
More money is flowing back into the U.S. economy. And I think the RBI has taken a very tough line on the rupee. It has investors spent a lot of dollars to keep the rupee where it is right now. To what extent it can keep the rupee at this stage is a moot point. But I guess rupee will continue to remain under pressure in the coming days.
Let's look at the oil market now. Global crude oil prices today fell around 0.5%. However, signs of bullish demand in an International Energy Agency report capped the losses. In intraday trade, Brent crude was trading at $92.80 per barrel, while WTI crude prices was at $87 per barrel. Experts like you have suggested that the Middle East, especially Saudi Arabia, wanted at $100 per barrel. There is price pressure. How do you see prices? Do you see it moving southward or northward?
I think they will stabilize at the current levels. I don't see they are moving sharply up or moving sharply down. The big question is to what extent the issue of a price cap is resolved at the forthcoming meetings of the global producers and the consumers, G7.
और मल्टी कमोडिटी एक्सचेंज में अक्टूबर के वायदा कारोबार में सोना आज 60 रुपए की गिरावट से 50,075 रुपए प्रति 10 ग्राम पर था। दिसंबर अनुबंध वाली चांदी 90 रुपए टूटकर 56,720 रुपए प्रति किलो पर कारोबार कर रही थी। न्यूयॉर्क मर्केंटाइल एक्सचेंज में सोना मंदी के साथ $1,711.80 प्रति औंस पर था। चांदी भी गिरावट के साथ $19.45 प्रति औंस पर कारोबार कर रही थी। बहुत ही संक्षेप में जानना चाहेंगे भट्टाचार्य जी, सोना अभी भी 50 और 51 के सीमित दायरे में?
नहीं, सोने में जब फेस्टिवल सीजन में डिमांड बढ़ेगा शायद थोड़ा, और दाम शायद थोड़ा बढ़ सकता है। मैं इस वक्त यही हम इंडिकेट कर सकते हैं।
भट्टाचार्य जी, कार्यक्रम में आने और चर्चा के लिए आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
नमस्कार।
And before we close, a reminder of the headlines. Wholesale inflation eases to 12.4% in August this year with ease in manufactured products. Domestic stocks have witnessed modest losses. Sensex closes below 60,400 level. Nifty settles near 18,000 mark, and rupee weakens by 29 paise against the US dollar. And that's it in this edition of Market Mantra. For now, goodbye.